Three, two, one.
Woo!
Hey everybody, it's me, it's Jay Gordon. Welcome to this first broadcast of what I'm calling Azure FunBytes here on Twitch. I'm really glad that you're able to join me. Today is an interesting first start into what has been a really, really cool part about learning how to use Azure in different ways. So every week, I'd like you to join me. We're going to find different subjects around Azure fundamentals that you are going to maybe find interesting. I hope so. What we're going to do, could have a little drink. I'll take some of your questions. We'll talk about things related to the subjects we're going to cover. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about this week's subject. And so let's talk about it. We're going to talk about storage on Azure. So if you watch the intro video that I published yesterday, you'll see that there's a number of different ways that you can utilize Azure to store different types of data. We went over a bunch of them, and today I'm going to really focus on just a few use cases. And what we're going to do is solve 3 problems. That's right, we're going to solve 3 problems. If you saw it on Twitter, I talked about it, and we'll go over it in just a second. But I want you to hear about what the 3 problems are before we start really getting into them. So Azure Storage allows you to kind of solve the three problems that we have today. Just to let you know, this is the first episode, so there are no previous episodes. Thanks for watching. Let's keep going. So the great thing about Azure Storage is it provides you a place to solve a number of different problems that you may have. And today we're going to solve three problems. So the first problem is going to really relate to web hosting. And basically what we're going to say is I've got a static website. I've been running it on an Apache server for a really long time. I can't continue to run it on a single VM Apache server because it doesn't make sense anymore. So how do I solve that problem? We're going to solve that problem first today, and we're going to do it around a static website. Static websites, what are they? We'll talk more. So the second problem we're going to solve is more related to web hosting about individual objects. So let's say that you want to serve object files, maybe something like videos. Maybe you want to store log files. Maybe you want to do almost anything, just unstructured data, very, very simple to store. We're going to show you how to do that. So we're going to solve a problem of how can I store lots and lots of unstructured content or data that I may want to serve to the internet. So think about what you would want to do, say, where you're hosting a website, you've got thousands of images. I wouldn't want to keep them on a server nowadays. I don't think that's the best place to do. I wouldn't want all those origin requests to my server. I would much rather it going to a service. And so we'll talk about how we can use storage to do that. And then the final problem we're going to solve is one that I'm really super familiar with. I spent a number of years working as a system administrator, and in that time, I dealt with a lot of Linux servers, and they weren't always managed by me. I sometimes was just the support person, and I would come in late in the game, and by the time it was too late, the hard disk on the primary root partition would be full. And so in the past, what we would have to do on physical servers is go order the disk, shut the server down, insert the disk, and then do the normal fdisk, make the directory, make the partition, mount it, and then finally do our data migration. So we've got this period of downtime that we're going to work with and that we know about that includes something more than just a simple moving of data from one spot to another. So what we're going to do is solve a problem of a server that doesn't have enough hard disk space for its content. Whatever that content may be, it's data that needs to get stored somewhere else than the root partition. Okay, so we've got our three problems. We'll show how we can use Azure fundamentals to solve those problems. And once we solve those problems, along the way, please ask me questions. I got my iPad in front of me with the chat up. Feel free to ask questions. Now, if you're watching this recorded, don't worry, you can ask me questions too. Go ahead and send a tweet to @AzureFunBytes or to me personal @JDestra. One or the other, you're welcome to do so. Send me your questions. Let me know if you were really getting something out of this. Just be in touch. I want to hear from you. This is all for you. I love doing this, but I'm doing this for you, and I want you to get the most out of this. So why don't we get started? All right. So I'm going to bring up my screen, and I'll make it a little bigger for you. How's that? All right. It should be big enough to see. I'm going to increase my font a little bit here on the Azure portal, just to give you a little bit more visibility. And then to the right here, you can see I've got just VS Code. And the first problem I said I wanted to solve today was around a static website. So I have a static website. You can see here, it's written in Hugo. And so it's really, really simple. Hugo allows us to create static websites. And then we don't have to do all the dynamic database management and stuff like that. It's just not necessary. All right. So I'm just going to focus on the everything here for a little bit. All right. So there we go. All right. So let's take a look at what we've got right now. We have Azure, and we have, to my right, this website. So this website, it's pretty basic. It's just a simple index.html. You can see just some very, very basic JavaScript. And eventually what this index will do was look at this content/blog directory. And these are all just markdown files. And these markdown files are eventually converted by a static site generator. And that static site generator eventually turns them all into index files. And then they represent each individual page. So we can look here and we can see that the pages are actually written in Markdown, but Hugo, which is just a Go application, you can download it on pretty much any platform. I did it right here on my Mac. You go and you grab the Hugo package, you compile everything. I should say you create the scaffolding, you add a theme, but we're not going to talk about how to create a Hugo website. What we're going to do is talk about what happens when you want to use a really inexpensive place with low amounts of overhead to store this when it's done. So I've gone ahead and you can see I've got this repository. So I'm going to show it to you in my browser, github.com. I'm going to give you a link to this as well. So this is the repository of the code that we're going to work with today. And the reason why I like to do things with this is that it's a simple amount of code, very, very easy to work with. And literally, it's a blog with information about my dog. Take it, customize it, do whatever you want with it. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat. There you go. So what are we going to do with this code? I am going to deploy it. So to deploy it, what we're going to do is we've got several options with Azure, but literally one of the most inexpensive options right now for something like this is Blob storage. And you can turn that storage container into a static web host. So the data that you upload to it, a blob. So let's look at the documentation around blob storage. So when you think about blobs, they're really, really great for object storage. So we're going to be using this to host objects. Essentially all of our objects in this public directory. Because if we look in that public directory, essentially that's everything for our index, our individual sections, and then our blog posts. So really, the thing that's great about VS Code is it makes the actual deployment process extremely simple. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go over that. So we're not even going to really need to use the dashboard. And the reason we're not going to need to use the dashboard is super, super simple. VS Code has an extension to make this completely simple. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to walk you through the process of the VS Code extension. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll solve the problem. We've got this website, and we want to host it. So I'm going to focus back here a little bit more on our screen. Okay. If you got any questions, please send it. So VS Code has an extension in the extension section for Azure Storage. So we'll go ahead and we'll look at it. Azure Storage right here. So I've already installed it, but the process essentially would be for you to click install, refresh, and then go back to your repository. And once you've gone back to your repository, what you can do with these extensions is right here, I've got the Azure, is we can go into our subscription, and we can see what storage options are available to us. Right now, it's just basically looking for everything, but we're going to skip that portion. So once this extension is installed and you've authenticated, what you're capable of doing is literally going here, clicking the right click, and going to deploy to static website. So what's that going to do for me? Well, we're going to step through every single portion of this blob storage creation. We'll look at the actual blob storage on the Azure side and then figure out what just happened. So the first thing I'm going to do, like I said, I've built my static site with Hugo. It's basically rendered all these markdown files into the portions of this public directory that we're wanting to deploy. We go ahead, we right click, and we just go deploy to static website. So now I get the option to go to my subscription. This is a subscription is where all your drawn down paying resources come from. This is a cost center, if you will, for everything. And the next thing is we need to have a storage account. A storage account is essentially where all of our different storage requirements are kept. So what we're going to do is create a new storage account. I'm going to do advanced. So I'm going to create a new globally unique place for the storage account. It's just a name. And so that name I'm going to call the Rico Info Center. It's the Rico Information Center. All right, so I'm going to focus a little bit more on the screen right now. Cool. So the Rico Info Center, right? Cool. Ooh, entry not stored. Let's fix that. So we're going to go right click, deploy to static website. We'll pick my subscription. We'll create a new storage account. Ooh, let's figure out what's going on here. So the extension, okay. Entry not found in cache. Weird. Okay, so let's go here and we'll find my subscription. We'll try it this way. Create a storage account. All right, these things happen when you do it and you do it live. So let's close VS Code. Let's reopen VS Code. These things happen, unfortunately. So let me figure out why it's happening, because it worked way, way easier before. So let's troubleshoot it, okay? So we'll go back to here and let's log into all of our storage accounts, because it looks like it's plugged in and it seems to be working. But what we're going to do is just give it a second. Let's make sure that everything's working and working properly. But to go back over, what we're going to do is we're going to take this website. We should be able to just right click here, deploy to static website. Looks like it's just still activating the extension. Like I said, when you do it live. Sometimes these things happen. Okay, so we'll select our subscription. It's going to ask me to select a storage account or create a new one. So we're going to create a new one. We're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it the Rico Info. We'll hit enter. So now it's going to create a resource group. It's going to host it. And if we look down right over here, I'm going to make it a little bigger so you can see it. And if we go right over and you look in the lower right-hand corner, it's going to create the storage account, the Rico Info, in location West US with the SKU, and that says standard there. And what that means, it's going to use a standard SKU storage. We can actually enlarge this, get more. So SKU standard LRS. So that's hot storage, essentially. Something that we're going to grab on demand. So right now, as you can see, the storage account has been enabled for static hosting. It's giving me the information that we can have an index document of index.html, And we also have a 404 document of index.html. So we've been given a place to host essentially like HTML websites. It's very, very simple. You don't need to really configure any of it yourself. So the deployment's complete. The primary web endpoint is right here. And it even shows me browse to the website. So let's browse to it. And if we look right here in my browser, here's our URL, the Rico info, and this is a static web host. We've got right here, everything's connected. We can see my posts all work. Everything's there. Super, super simple, wasn't it? It took almost nothing to do this, and that's really the freaking amazing part about using this type of technology, is that quickly we could just have a website deployed. And to be honest with you, we did not need to install anything really crazy. We already had VS Code installed. I just really needed to go over to this area, and what we can do in VS Code is essentially authenticate these services that are built into Azure. So I've got a couple stored in here. And like I said, we'll go to my different storage accounts and we can see all the different places. I've done this before. And so now let's go back a little bit. Okay. Let's go to the dashboard. So we built this static website. Okay. Let's go to my resource groups. We're going to filter out. I've got a lot of subscriptions that I work with, obviously. So we're just going to filter it out to mine. So the Rico info, that was just what we created, right? So let's look at what we built. I need to make this a little smaller just to make it easier for me to eventually show you the blades. So let me do that first. Okay, so there we go. So here's our storage account we created. Pretty cool. We did not really have to log into the portal and create any of these things. This is exactly what we just created on our website. I should say from our VS Code, we created our website. And if we wanted to here, what I can go right here easily is go into the index if I wanted to and make a direct change. I don't want to do that. What I would want to do if I wanted to make a change is I could go into the website, make the modifications to the markdown that's associated with it. Then I would go into a terminal. I would use the terminal to eventually render Hugo into those new pages. I would I would export those and eventually put them into this spot right here. Make my change, and what it would do here. So let's take a look. What would happen? So it would go in here to this place, the Rico info. And what's really interesting is that we don't have to stick with this. We can deploy something else to this if we really wanted to. If the website completely changed and we needed to, we can just use the same space. So let's go to containers, which is where it created containers that are associated with the Rico info. So the Rico info is our storage account. Let's look at that hierarchy. The Rico info lives within a resource group called the Rico info, because everything in Azure is a resource, and all resources need to be stored in resource groups. Groups are just a place to keep your stuff. That's it. Really, really simple, like theory here. So inside this resource group, we have the Rico info storage account. So if we click on that storage account, the way we solved the problem is we allowed the VS Code extension to create this storage account. Then within the container, create these two containers. And what do these two containers have? The web static pages that we uploaded via VS Code. So you can see everything here. Literally, it's everything we just uploaded. We could, if we really wanted to, go into this index.html file and make direct edits to the file. See here? It's edit. If I wanted to, I could make a change right here. say details on Rico the Pug with a bang, preview it. And then I could save it. And then let's go back. I think it was just on. Let's see. Should be there. Let's see what I changed for that matter. Well, I think you get what I'm saying. So what we've done, oh, I just added the title. I see. And I can't really see the title, so. Oh, there it is. See? There's that little bang. It's really, really small if you can see it, but I added a bang to the title. I made a direct edit right in the Azure Blob Storage section. That's right, Blob Storage for right here for this index.html file. There are our images, and what's really cool, we go back to the containers section. We've got our logs. So we know if we need to do some log analyzation, if we really wanted to, we could turn on. So we would have to enable that in our information. I have to determine, I have to figure out exactly how often that logging happens. It's a fairly easy thing to set up. So let's take a look also on the static website setup where everything is here. So if we were going to do this manually, we very well could. We would just have to go and switch this from disabled to enabled. We get a primary endpoint that's based on our storage account name. We get a document name, and then we get our index error path. So both of our indexes for our index document name and our error. We can customize those if we have a static site that doesn't use those particular indexes and error docs. If you have a 404, which I do here. So what I can do, I guess, is just change it. So let's change our 404 to 404.html and save. And so after about 30 seconds, it seems like it'll just make that change for us. And so at this point, what we can do with this is if we wanted to, we could take this static website, register a domain name, add a CNAME, eventually forward our URL over to that, and essentially we've solved that problem. We've taken a really simple website that we may have been hosting on something like an Apache server that may be on a VM, or maybe it came from your data center. You know, these are great ways to not over-engineer problems. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, essentially, is not over-engineering these problems. So the next problem I have, and it's a very simple and cute problem. The Rico problem was getting his website hosted. It was very easy. But the next problem we're going to solve is I've got these really cool pictures here for my new app, and I want to host them somewhere. And I want my application to grab those images from an HTTPS capable source. And I want it to, what I want it to do is always be there, because I don't want when my my application or my website needs to do a call to its origin. I don't want it to happen on my server, because my application is doing enough providing I should say the server's doing enough providing the application to you. If your app on top of doing whatever processing of information or serving whatever it is your app may do, on top of that, if you want people going to your app as well and pulling images directly from the origin server, it's not really going to help performance. And so I like to think of this example as a really great one. People like to use WordPress a ton. People like to use different types of CMSs. You may need a place to store your images that might be in your CMS, that you're hosting a part of something, or maybe you're serving video and you need a place to host the video. Maybe it's large and you can't host it as part of some like Microsoft 365. Maybe it just doesn't make sense because you eventually want to embed this video as part of another application. So what's really cool is what we can make use of is Blob storage in kind of the same way that we just did. So we're not even going to deploy it in the way we did before. What we're going to deploy it, the code is we're basically going to drag and drop. So the point right here is to show you that these fundamentals associated with Azure give you really just basic tools to do simple or complex problems. And so today I really, since it's the first one of these, I wanted to focus on some simple problems that can become complex because I ran a pretty cool website for a long time and we had about 14 years worth of images associated with the New York Yankees. Just lots and lots of articles. We had podcasts. We needed places to put this stuff. And I had WordPress running on these machines. And I'll be really honest. WordPress at a very high level gets to be, especially with all those plugins, gets to be kind of heavy. And so what you don't want to do is put additional stress on the servers, and most of the time it's LAMP servers. You don't want to throw that on there. So let's offset some of that storage requirement, and let's take these pictures. So what have I got here? So my new web application, it's very important that this is part of it. This picture of Rico, it absolutely must be part of the application. It needs to be always in the app 24/7. It can't ever go down. So that's something that we can do easily by storing this picture, sweet baby Rico, inside of our Blob storage container. So we've already created a Blob storage container, but I'm going to make a new one for you. I'm going to start from scratch. So within my resource group, we're going to go back to the Rico info one. But what we're going to do here is we are going to click add. So we'll be able to go in here, and this is the marketplace. This is where you can basically find almost anything Azure related that you want. It's everything Azure, like anything you want to build with Azure. Almost anything. If you want to build a WordPress site like I'm talking about, you can. If you need a MySQL, if you need an SQL server, if you want a web app for simple web hosting, if you need a Kubernetes cluster, we've got all that stuff here. But today, what we're going to do is storage account. So you'll see here storage account, blob, file, table, queue. Those are our different types of storage that we can build with it. So Microsoft Azure provides scalable, durable cloud storage, backup, and recovery solutions for any big or small, any data big or small. It works with the infrastructure you already have to have cost effectively enhance your existing applications' business continuity strategy and provide storage required with, you get me. You can read the rest of that if you like. All you have to do is bring that up. Pricing, take a look at it real quick because I don't know how much most of this stuff costs. I like to just teach you about it. That's really cheap. Rico, we're going to host you for next to nothing. Okay, so the block blobs, very inexpensive if you're doing it with a 3-year reserve capacity. I'm not going to be using 3 years. But if I wanted to, I can go here. I could do some pricing on the kind of storage I need. We can see here, first terabyte of hot storage, premium storage. Cool. I mean, there's different levels. So premium gives us access to block blobs and append blobs, low latency. Hot means you're going to use it all the time. Cool means you don't really need it that often, but you may access it once in a while. Archive, think of it like backups. Think of it like more than backups. Think about it literally as cold storage. We're going to take like Boba Fett, and he's going to go out there and he's going to take your stuff and put it in Carbonite. And when he puts it in Carbonite, the thing that he doesn't want to do is have to open it back up and pull Han out just because you need a couple of hairs off Han's head. No. You need all of Han to get HAN out of the Carbonite. So that's kind of what archive storage is. You can get it, but it's going to cost you more. And you can see it's a little bit, what you actually end up paying a little bit more for is the restore. The actual saving everything is super inexpensive because you can see it's way cheaper than the actual premium, and that's on purpose. So we've got reserve capacity, but like I said, we're going to focus on a blob. So what we're going to do, we'll go back to our storage account here, and we're going to click create. While I'm doing that, anybody have any questions? I know there's some of you still watching, and I appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions. And if at this point you're watching on YouTube or something like that, and you watch a recorded version, if you have any questions, remember you can still send them to me on Twitter. So let's keep going. So we need to have a storage account name. This is going to be just a logical name for where things are going to be kept. In this case, I'm just going to call it Rico app. We can pick where we want our app data to be stored, where our storage account will live. And so I'm going to pick East US because I'm New York City all day, baby. Our performance is the different types of storage we want to use. And so in this case, I'm just going to use standard. They're also premium. We saw the pricing we talked about. The account kind. So let's look. What kind of storage do we want to create? Well, I want to create a blob. So blob storage. And the replication, read access, geo-redundant. So we're going to just choose it. And I'm going to pick locally redundant LRS storage. If you want to figure out more about locally redundant LRS storage, go to this documentation here. Okay. So we'll go to networking. And we're going to leave this access tier just to make sure as hot. Hot means we're getting the data. We're using this storage. So we don't want to have it in cool. That'll be a different tier. So you can see. So we want to make sure the cool access tier is not ideal for infrequently accessed data. Is ideal for infrequently. So you want to use hot for frequently accessed and cool for infrequently. So it'd be also smart to throw a cache like a CDN on top of stuff like this. We'll talk about that after. Networking. So we can choose where the image is available to. Right now, we're going to leave it to public so that we can make it HTTP capable. The world can get it just via a web call. So next, we'll go to advanced. It gives us whether or not everything has to be HTTPS. In this case, we'll say yes. Soft blob delete, when this is turned on, enables you to save and recover your blob data. We've got a share, versioning. Versioning may be useful for some of you. I always felt the best versioning was incrementing my file names. That's just me. You do what you want. We've got hierarchical namespace. We can look at that, even NFS3. We're not going to be using that either. So we'll click review and create. And once we do that, we'll be able to then create our blob storage space. So let's go. We'll submit deployment, create our storage space. We'll see our deployment being completed. I love this about Azure. So I'm an ops person, and I like to know what's going on. I'm a control freak. What can I tell you? And so, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad this is making sense. I really appreciate that. So the thing that's going on right here is I love being able to see what's going on in the background when you're deploying something. It is one of my favorite things about Azure is that we actually show you the operation details of what's going on, and we tell you when it's done. So we'll go to our resource. We've got our storage account. And now we can go here to containers. We're going to create a container. We'll change it to anonymous read access for containers and blob. And we're just going to name it repo pick. Okay, create. Now this is creating a container for us within this Rico app thing to store. So it's like a directory. So now when I click on Rico pick, let me show you. Now we can actually upload images. So let's upload this picture, this adorable little picture of Rico, okay? So we'll select right here. I'll drop this right here. Ooh. Selects the picture of Rico. Open. So there's advanced. We can use our authentication account if we want to. We can even change the tier, the block size, or even a specific folder, but we'll click upload. So it's uploaded my file right here. And like our static website that we went to before, we can see when we click on the actual, we've got our URL here, our version information, everything we need. We're not going to click edit, but what we can do is click here to copy to clipboard. And there's our picture. It's online. It's on the web. I can now refer to this image in my my application if I want to. And now let's talk about what else I could do. Is once I have this kind of storage availability, I can take something like this picture of Rico, and rather it coming straight from my my source, my origin, what we can do, and let's go back to the portal. Is what we can look our CDNs. So we've got right here Azure CDN, and a CDN is a content distribution network, a delivery network, excuse me, a content delivery network, and it gives you a way to host lots of big video, big audio, and let them transfer directly from edge points all over the world, making it that your content is delivered faster. So maybe the video that's a part of your app is managed and delivered by the CDN, and the origin of that stuff lies, say, in your Blob storage. So then you eventually have the CDN front end the video so that it's always super fast and available. So we can add domains and then make those domains available to our CDN so that we eventually have these really super fast responsive websites. And like I said, as close to you as possible. Edge locations of CDNs are really important. It's why they work. So there are distributions of CDNs all over the world, and of points of presence. And those points of presence allow you to reduce the overhead on your storage in general. And so we've solved two of our problems. Glad that things are making sense to you, Karim. If anyone else has any other questions before we start our next problem, let me know. But while we continue, before we go on to our next problem, I wanted to remind you that I'll be doing this every week. So every week, I want you to join me. I'll be doing it at the same time. It'll be Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern every week. I'm planning to expand where this will be seen, but right now, hoping we can get this as far. So let's take a look at this question right now. Hello. I wanted to use the uploaded images on my website. Is it possible to just link to each without setting the entire blob to container? Yes. Yeah, you can set restrictions. You can make certain files public and certain files private. Let's go back. I was going to bring up the next section, but I'm going to bring that up for you really quick. Let me get that ready before I go back to my screen, because I don't want to make you watch me go through everything. But Small Broccoli, let's get your answer around security, because security is always important when you're talking about how we're going to manage any single thing that's going to have any internet access. So we need to make sure that we secure everything. So I'm going to bring the screen back up. Okay, there we are. All right, so let's focus again on the Rico app one that we were talking about. Small Broccoli, let's let's show you in here. So what we have here are firewalls and virtual networks that we can actually secure our images or our content in general for. Then what we can also do is go into containers, and we can see right here, we have container properties, access policies. So we can go into access policies, and we can add policies, essentially. Read, write, certain times. So we can actually, if we want to, we can create private, non-available images and objects. We can also go in here to Rico pick, and we can look at the access policy on the individual file. So we can change the tier here. We can cool it, archive it, cancel. I believe we can edit. No, we can't edit it that way. Essentially what you need to do is work with the policies right here on the container and essentially specify. So I hope that helps you out, Small Broccoli. Thank you very much for the question. I do appreciate it. These are fun to do, and I like the platform of being able to show your question as well. So what are we going to do next? All right. Let me set it up. And while I set it up, so the next problem I'm going to have is a very, very common problem. We talked about it at the beginning of the broadcast. And I'm going to bring back up my screen. So I've got this virtual machine in Azure. And like all virtual machines, I built it with the best of intentions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into it. So I'll click SSH right here. I'm going to open up the Cloud Shell so I don't actually need to use another client. I've got my SSH key already in there too. So all I have to do is copy this. So let's SSH into this server. And so what we're going to do could easily be on a Windows server. The fact that we're doing it on a Linux server is just because I'm fairly Linux first in what I do. So I got an alert earlier, and we can actually see it when we log into the machine. Usage of slash at 98.7. That's 28 gigs. Of my 30 gigs available on the server used. So why is this a problem? Well, let's talk about it. Why would it be a problem for you to run out of storage on a Linux server? The big answer here is that most of the time, if it can't write new files, the server may very well crash. And that doesn't create some sort of reliability in what we're building. And so we don't want to do that. We want to build things that are reliable. Excuse me while I take a sip of my lovely beverage here. So let's talk a little bit about it for one quick question that I might have for you. When you deal with these problems, I mean, do you freak out? No, you shouldn't freak out. And the cool thing about the cloud is that these are solvable problems with easy tools. So I built this server a little while ago, and I already ran out of disk space. So let's look at where everything is. So I know that my app is running in root. Well, this data is running in root, because if I look at ls-al/, I've got this directory data. And if I du-sh data, 27 gigs. It's owned by root, so if I make any changes to that directory, it's got to be root. So we've got 27 gigs used, and let's look at here, df-h. What does this df tell us? Well, it looks like we only have one attached disk. Now, we do have the ephemeral disk, and ephemeral disks come with a lot of Azure VMs. So let's look at our VM. We'll do an overview. And we'll look at the type of server it is. So it is a B1LS. And a B1LS is a 1 vCPU, a half gig of memory. It's a pretty basic small server. And it's only got 30 gigs of disk space. And it has an ephemeral disk. So if you go here to disks, what you're not going to see are the ephemeral disks. All you're going to see here is this, because ephemeral disks are that. They are ephemeral. They don't last. They're not there for long-term storage. So we're not going to use SDB1. It doesn't make sense to. What we're going to do is we're going to add a data disk. And in order to add a data disk, what we're going to do is essentially go back to our resource group. We're going to click Add. And we're just going to type disk and manage disks. So we want to use a managed disk. This is going to be what helps us, excuse me, just want to log back into my iPad. We want to use a managed disk. And that's essentially what is attached to our server here, our VM. So let's read the description. Managed disks is an abstraction of a current standard and premium storage disk in Azure Storage. You only need to specify the type, standard or premium, and the size that you need, and Azure will manage and create everything for you. That's ultimately the best way to manage storage on Azure related to things like hard disks. So what we're going to do is click Create. And we're going to create a new managed disk. So I'm just going to bring this up in a new tab so we can kind of just look back and forth. And I'll put this over here for a moment because we don't really need VS Code. So I'm going to bring up our resource group. We're going to look at our disk details and then just make some decisions on where we're going to put everything, okay? So let's look at where our VM currently exists because we want to pick that region. And then I want to use a naming convention that's fairly close to what I've already got. So here is our server. It's a clock app, we're going to call it. That's why it's called clock server. Your server may have a different name. And so what we're going to do is that it's in East US. So we'll pick East US. We're using the same resource group and the same subscription. We're going to give it a name. So let's go to disks here for our VM. And I'm doing this just because I want to. So AFB clock server disk 1. So what we'll call this is AFB clock server data disk 1. Okay? That's what I want to call this. So we're going to pick it in that region. We're going to not select an availability zone. We're not going to do that right now. We'll talk about availability zones in a future episode around servers and networks. We've got a VNet one coming up, I believe, in like 2 weeks. Please check that one out. So we're going to leave that as none. The source type. So we can pick if there's an existing snapshot of the data that we want to have or a storage blob where the image might be stored. We're not going to pick one today. And then we can actually pick how much disk size we need. And as we increase our disk type, you can see that performance increases. And then also, of course, the money increases. So for this case, we're just going to add another. We're going to add, because we need to have future-proof it. We don't need that 1024. We're just going to go with the half a terabyte. So we'll go ahead, we'll click OK. And so now we've got our size, encryption. So now we can choose whether we want to use default at rest with the platform key, or you want to manage your own keys. We're not managing our own keys, but not for this thing. This is a basic app server. So we're going to do review and create. And so right now, it's going to create that disk. All right? It's done. Let's do it. Create the disk. It validated that all the things that we wanted were correct. And if we wanted to, we could save something like that in an ARM template so that we don't have to do it through the portal. You could do it for the CLI. You could do it any way you want. But the way we're doing it right now is through the portal, so show you how easy it is. So let's bring this back over. Cool. So let's make this bigger for you. Like I said, we don't need VS Code anymore. I'll even increase the screen a little so you can see it better. Okay, so now you can see that area right here, data disks, because this is our operating system disk. I don't want to put any more things on that because I want to crash my server. So I'm going to go to add data disk. So LUN, that's the space within the server where it's going to be stored. We'll have a different LUN for each additional disk. We're going to use LUN 0, the name. And if we go here, we can see AFB clock server data disk, that 512 premium. So that's the one I just, and it says no shares done. So we're not going to mess with host caching. We're not going to mess with any of these things. We didn't enable it. And so what we're going to do, we've attached this, and now we have to just save it. So what's going on right now? It's really cool, actually. Azure is virtually installing a hard drive into this virtual machine. So it's like there's a VM tech, or I should say a data center tech, and that data center tech is opening up the machine while it's still on, or going to one of the slots that maybe a disk is open in, and they're putting in a disk or a couple of disks to create an array. This is what happened. We just created a new RAID array, if you will, of disks and just inserted it. And now that it's actually been plugged into the computer, we need to do what we would do with almost any server. We need to make it work on the machine. So let's go back here, I believe, is where we were SSH'd in. Come on, browser. There we are. Okay, so here's where we were logged in before. And what we're going to do, we'll make this a little bigger for you. Cool. So we'll make that a little bigger for you. And I want you to see dmessage is something you need to run as root. So we're going to sudo su. Now we're root. And like I said, let's go into /data. Data old. Let's go in there. There's all of our old data. So you can see it's all these files, images, pics, logs. So what we want to do is we want to take data and we want to move it somewhere else into a larger hard drive. So what we're going to do is we need to actually look at dmessage. Dmessage is going to provide me with system information about the current mounted file systems and disks. So if I actually do dmessage and I egrep for SD, we can see the logs of when the machine started and any changes of all these SD devices. Those are the attached SCSI disks, but they're not really physical SCSI disks. They're just virtualized. Okay? So now all we have to do is attach that. So what we're going to do is we're going to fdisk it. So fdisk dev. Let me see if I can bring this up a little higher for you. I think that's better, right? So dev and SDC. So we're going to fdisk this. So this is standard Linux stuff. There's nothing specific to Azure about this. So we're going to type N to create a new partition. This is a primary partition on this disk. The partition number will be 1. The first sector, the last sector, we're just going to pick defaults. So it takes the whole size of the disk. We could say that. And so now the standard is to hit W. So now our partition table has been altered. And if I type dmessage and I look up SDC, oops, sorry, let's try that again. grep. That's my mobile. You can see SDC1 here was created. That's our partition. Now we need to mount it. And to mount that, so let's look at the fstab file. Cat etc fstab. It's using block ID. Block ID, I love using block ID to mount rather than using device location or disk label. I love doing it this way. And to do it, it's really simple. We type block ID dev SDC1. And so we get this information about the partition. And so we need to go ahead and see that it hasn't been formatted yet. So we can't do anything with it. So what we need to do is make fs. And I'm going to use ext4 dev SDC1. And now it's going to format the drive. And watch what happens when we go ahead and we do that block ID on the formatted hard disk as opposed to just doing it on the raw partition. So we'll give this a second. It's just doing what formatting does. Creating the journal. It's going to allocate everything it needs, and then it'll be a standard hard drive. So while that's happening, anybody have any questions? Okay, not right now. Cool. So let's figure out what's going on with this. All right, still running. We'll give it a second. So that is going ahead and attaching. And then the next step will be getting the block ID. And then, so there we go. So it's finished partitioning it. And now let's run block ID on that. We've got our UUID, our type of partition, and the parts UUID. So what we need is this right here. This is the UUID. This is a unique ID. And we're going to open up FS tab. I'm old. I use VI. I take no, I will not apologize. I'm sorry. So we're going to put the block ID, I should say UUID from block ID first. And then the next place we're going to say we're going to mount it. So we're going to mount it in the directory /data. New. And then we'll eventually move everything. We could do that, but we'll call it /data new. And then what we'll do is we'll just say it's ext4 because that's what it is. We create an ext4. We'll pick defaults, discard. So we'll just use the default image, or I should say default mount options, and then we'll do 0, 0. I have no remembrance of what that means anymore, but we pick defaults because that's all we need. Okay. So now we need to make dir data new, right? Mount data new. Add. So now let's rsync minus, we don't even have to rsync. We can just cp minus rpv these files to data new. And so after we do this, what we can easily do, schedule a little bit of maintenance. And then after we schedule a little bit of maintenance, we will go ahead and move the old data directory out, call it something temporary. This new data directory, we will then move within that new data directory. And we'll call it data old if we need to, or data new. But anyway, we will mount it eventually on /data. So what I'll do is I'll go into the FS tab and I'll eventually modify the location. And so the reason why we do this is so that when we reboot the machine, that we know that this is going to be available when it's done. So, I mean, that's really it for today. We got through the first episode of Azure FunBytes. I think we had a really good time together. I got some of your questions answered. And so thanks again for being part of this really super awesome experiment. If you have any questions, I'll still take them right now. Or if not, then we'll say goodbye until next week. Cool. I guess we'll say goodbye till next week. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm going to end it with a tune like I did. Hey, Kareem, thank you so much for watching it. For people who are watching it recorded on YouTube or also recorded on Twitch, thank you so much for being part of this. My goal next is to be part of doing this on Microsoft Learn TV. So hopefully that's coming next, and you'll be able to see me there as well as here on Twitch and everywhere else, YouTube, you name it. Anyway, so thank you very much to you too. Thank you for your questions, for being part of it. I really appreciate it. So before I go, you see this link? Please, if you don't already use Azure, I will be creating a dev.to blog post that is going to have all the information and links from today. Please check it out. Every single episode will come with a dev.to with all the links that you can use to documentation from the things we learned. So thanks a lot, and I will catch you next time here on Azure FunBytes. Please just let me know what you thought. Leave me a message. Send me a tweet. And please, if you can, share with your friends. Subscribe, follow, tweet, like, whatever you can. See you next time.